We are going to begin from Os Yud Beis, page 13, down at the bottom of the page there. Just to point out, we said yesterday that the whole Iker is togetherness when it comes to Avodas Hashem, right? That you can't do things, build a bama for yourself, build like your own little altar, and do things the way you understand it. And we spoke also about thank you. We spoke also about all the benefits, 3 different benefits that could come about by working with others, engaging with others, getting their counsel, and finding out things that you don't otherwise know. And then when you speak it out, if you feel the pain, and then you feel the regret more. So many beneficial things come from dafka working together. You miss out entirely if you go it alone with a midyan attitude. And now we're going to continue that in a much deeper way. He says, "Hine kasher yedua." When it comes to service to God, basic, Chassidic meditation type stuff, you have 2 different basic forms of avoda. Aleph, avoda b'simcha. One is when you do the avoda of simcha. In other words, you're thinking about God in order to bring you to a state of joy and closeness to Hashem. And meditating well on the greatness of Hashem. Literally just like the worlds and the angels and how big, ma rabu masecha, ma gadu masecha, how big it is, how wondrous it is, how many it is. Hen ba'otzim gedulaso, both regarding just the awesome bigness of it, be'inyan habriya yesh me'ayin, right? And meditating on the fact that everything just comes ex nihilo, out of nothing. Hashem creates things, yet something from nothing. Besides the fact that that Hashem created everything, something from nothing, is a wondrous concept. We don't really have any way of depicting such a koach, right? We can't create something yesh ma'ayin, nor have we ever seen anything else create something yesh ma'ayin. It doesn't exist such a power except in what we call HeChaltzu, in like the bosom of the Creator. He's the only one who could do such a thing. So just meditating on the fact that the whole existence is here out of nothing itself is wondrous, which we have no comprehension of. Odzos, after the parentheses, yesh b'zeh plaus the idea de brias yesh ma'ayin hu b'chinas richo ka'erech. There's another wonder which comes out of it, just besides just it being so wondrous, that yesh ma'ayin is what we call in a state of richuk ha'erech, which means it's comparatively distant from you. And this is the difference, what we call cause and effect, which we see most things in that we can perceive in reality are created in such a way that there's a cause, and the cause leads to an effect. And this is what we call, let's say, a kiruv ha'erech. It's something that the cause and the effect have a general closeness to each other, as we'll explain in a second. Whereas the creation yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing, the experience is that there's an essential distance from what would essentially be the cause and the effect. We don't call them cause and effect, we call them the something and the nothing, right? But this is like a well-worn concept in Chassidus. Let me just say a few words about it. He's going to explain himself. But what does it mean, richu ka'erech, like distant, comparatively distant, is that when something is created, he's going to explain, when something is created from actually, let's take it inside, and he'll explain, and I'll flower it up if it's misunderstood. He said, ilu va'alu, cause and effect, which are 2 basic ways that, let me just say one thing, right? Essentially, for existence itself to come into being, right? This is not a cause and effect concept. Why? Because cause and effect means that a little bit of the cause is experienced in the effect. It's essentially what we're looking at. Like if you hit like 2 pool balls, right, on a table, the fact that the other one goes, it's like taking the energy of the first one, the first one like leaves evidence of itself in the effect, right? Or sometimes we say intellect and emotion are another form of cause and effect. That even though your emotion is born out of your intellect, and it's a different dimension than intellect, it works differently. It's a feeling. Nonetheless, every feeling that you have has a remnant of the intellect that made it exist, and it's actually like thriving and living on a little bit of energy that is tucked into the emotion, which is powering it, which was the intellect that made it exist. So there's a little piece of the cause inside the effect. And there's like evidence of the cause inside of the effect. For example, if you're sad, it's because you thought thoughts that led to sadness. If you're happy, it's because you thought thoughts that led to happiness. There's like evidence of the type of the cause inside of the effect. So that's why we call them close, right? Because even though there are two different dimensions and one caused the other, nonetheless, they're related to each other. They're be'erech, they're comparable to each other in some degree. And they're linked even to one another. This is what we call the HeChaltzu. Cause and effect is synonymous with the process that we call the Seder HeChaltzu. What does the word Seder HeChaltzu mean? The chain like descent. Why do we call it a chain? Because when you have two links of a chain, right, the idea is that the bottom link has like a place up inside the higher link, and the higher link has a place down inside the lower link because they're linked together, which means there's the presence of the cause in the effect, and then afterwards there's a presence of the effect in the cause, right? Because they're linked together. Now, the cause, the effect that's inside of the cause, the emotions that inside the intellect, they're not emotional yet, right? You're in the intellect, but it's like there's something inside the intellect which is like the emotions of the intellect, right? So when you're still inside the source, you have the emotions are inside the intellect. Then when it gives birth, so to speak, then you have the emotion, but then there's a little piece of the intellect inside the emotion, so you call that the intellect of the emotion. So this kind of cause and effect chains all the way down. It winds up, you have a little piece of the highest all the way down to the lowest, and the lowest exists also inside the highest. So nothing is really completely incomparable to each other. That's called the Ishtalshelus. But there's another process of bringing things into being, which is called Yesh Mi'ayin, something from nothing. The something from nothing is that, as its name indicates, right, the something comes out having zero knowledge and experience, feeling, perception of the something that created it, right? And so therefore, there's what we call a richuk ha'erech. There's an essential distance between them that you can't study, so to speak, the effect and then like sort of know something about the cause, because there's no evidence of the cause in the effect. It just came here out of absolutely nowhere. And this, so what he's saying is, besides the fact that the creation of something from nothing is just wild, like we don't have an example of that in the world, like how can you just make something be out of nowhere with no previous cause? He says, but also the notion that it creates this like, this wondrousness of our source, that we don't know where we came from, and like it creates a feeling of just infiniteness of God's distance from us that we can't have any grasp of, and there's no evidence of him. This is like the second state of wonder that he's saying is connected with Yesh Mi'ayin. You see, we went into a different direction here. Last few days we were talking pretty much like Musar, just like about your Yesh. And he sort of Baruch Hashem, he's softening it up, bringing it back to like a Chassidic conversation a little bit here. And anyway, so that's my little 2 cents. But he in his own words, here, by the way, we have plenty of copies. Betzalel, Aryeh, all you. Here you go. You can pass that to my friend. And there's more here, Betzalel, if you want a lot more. Thanks, Levi. Okay, so he says at the very last line on the page, he says, the ilu va'alu, when it comes to cause and effect, hu b'chinas hashpa b'kiruv, it's what we call a close influence. Sha'ilu, page 14, Sha'ila mislavesh ba'alu, as we said earlier, a moment ago, that the cause invests itself into the effect, va'alu margish es ilaso, and the effect feels its cause. Like we said before about the emotions, like there's like a faint remnant of the intellect that drove the emotion, that created the emotion inside the emotion itself. If you're happy, it's because there was an intellectual process that led to happiness, which birthed this emotion. And that's why we say that the effect is comparative to the cause. In other words, there are 2 different dimensions. Intellect is definitely not emotion, but they're related. This is another way of looking at this, is like birth, right? That you have like generations, and inside the child there's a little piece of the mother. Of course, the child begins his journey inside the mother, right? So you have the cause and the effect is inside the cause, and even when the effect comes out, the cause is still is still evident in there, right? It looks like the mother, it thinks like the mother, right? So therefore they're called related. They have a certain relationship to each other, and they can sort of feel each other, not that far away, even though they're in separate realities. Not so when it comes to the bringing into existence of something from nothing. We call this not comparable. They're not related. They're incomparable. But and that's what we call a distant type of influence. That the Creator, when creating something from nothing, it's a way of completely concealing himself from his creation and basically denying them any access just from investigating their own being of what it could be, the thing that they came from. This is a form that Hashem creates in which he totally hides himself from the creation. He does not leave a little bit of himself over inside of it and invest himself into it like is done in the way of cause and effect. You following this?
Yeah, I think so.
Ask a question.
No, so far so good.
Okay.
So far so good.
I was thinking that I've heard of something called the butterfly effect.
Okay.
That a farmer in Thailand affects whatever we're doing here, for example.
Right.
That we don't know, and that would be like the distance.
That would be the distance? I'm not sure. Because in that case, in a sense, even in the HeChaltzu, we're saying that the effect is inside of the cause, right? And when it comes out, they're still chained together. Now, the truth is there's chain. It goes like a million links in this chain. And by the time you're at the bottom of the chain, you might not have a direct experience that you exist in the top chain, and you might not experience the top chain inside of you because there's many chains in between. But since you're in a cause and effect type of relationship, reality is you could still access something about your cause, and you find yourself as an effect somewhere inside the cause. So even the butterfly guy, even though you and I are so far away, but in theory you could measure each chain event that led to here, because ultimately that is a cause and effect type of relationship, right? Something happened which led to something else, which led to something else, and evidence of each one is found in the next one. So ultimately the final effect really could be led back to that cause. When we're talking about yesh me'ayin, we're talking about just quite simply, here's an elephant, right? Boom! Like it just comes, there it is. There's nothing that caused it. It didn't have like a previous thing which had a previous thing before that. It's something wondrous. We don't have we don't have an example of that in our world because, like as I say, only Hashem can create yesh me'ayin. Everything that you see and everything we're going to come up with science to like try and figure out how this works. We're going to come up with a cause and effect type of relationship because that's the only evidence that we have. That's how this place runs. But how did this place get here in the first place? It wasn't from a cause and effect. From God to world was not, I'll take a little bit of God and I'll put a drop of that into world, right? And then therefore the world would be like a natural result from the cause of God. That didn't work like that. It was just came out of nowhere. The whole system from top to bottom, the whole chain, from the Chochmeh Ilav Atzilus to Malchus Da'asiyah, was all, boom, made at one time yesh me'ayin, and then it chained out, like year after year, generation after generation. So it is, the creation essentially works in a way of cause and effect, but to get to creation from God works in a way of yesh me'ayin. Follow?
Right. I heard an idea that you can only really be misbinding on something that you've experienced in some way. You can only really think about something you've experienced. So how are you supposed to think deeply about creation, like ex nihilo from nothing if you never experienced it?
Well, when you say experienced it, I mean you never experienced, let's say, the farmer in Thailand and the butterfly effect like on your person, but you can think about it and you can postulate that, like just like when I move this cup or I hit a pool ball, it hits another pool ball, and that hit pool, you know what pool is, right? They call it different names in different countries. That hits another pool ball. So you understand the concept of yesh me'ayin, and you can meditate on something that you have a familiarity with, and you can sort of expand that to a different set of category, much larger. Yesh me'ayin also, you might not have experienced the thing, but you, through the works and writings of the Rebbeim, they gave you an intellectual grasp of some sort, and he's continuing to do it. It's and like he's going to give all types of examples to enable you to have some type of intellectual experience with this, so that you can meditate on that. Right? Obviously, when we're trying to meditate, we're trying to bring ourselves to places where we're not presently in that space. Right? So you put your mind on some kind of a supernatural, meditation of the Rebbeim, so you can be where your thoughts are, right? And then you can gain experience of something that's outside of you. So I don't know if I agree with your essential premise that it depends what you mean. Like, do I actually have to have had that experience? Like I don't know what you mean by experience. Is it an emotional experience? Is it a life experience? Couldn't it be an intellectual experience? And then I figured something out and I can meditate on that. So in that way, you have enough tools in your basket, basically, to put intellectual pieces together of what is Yesh Me'ayin, and you can meditate on it, like we're doing right now.
Yesh Me'ayin.
Something from nothing.
So, why is God's creation of the world not cause and effect? It seems like the cause is God, the effect is a world from nothing.
Right. There's like A and B, right? The point is, and you can call A and B cause and effect, but in Chassidus, when we call it that, it has a certain connotation. And it represents closeness. Because what we're saying is that there's a piece of the cause in the effect, and there's an experience in the effect of the cause. What we're saying about is that A and B, when it's Yesh and Ayin, not cause and effect, is that it doesn't work like that. It's something that, and again, we don't have an example of it in this world, except for the Rebbeim giving us an intellectual framework to think about it. There is nothing that works like that in this world. Everything in our world is cause and effect, but how did the world get here to begin with? Is not cause and effect. A did not make B in the way that a little bit of A went into B, and therefore in B you can feel a little bit of A, but rather what happened, A produced B without putting any of itself into B. It just like stood there, like I'm trying to like figure out like some kind of like a way. All we have in our world is like some kind of a magic trick, right? That's what we would call that in our world. It's like, it's like someone just basically produces without any seed, a plant, right? It's what we would call like a miracle, right? Like there's no natural cause, there's no supernatural cause. He just made the whole existence be there without investing himself into it, without putting a little piece of God inside of this thing. It just became. So A made B, and when you look at it, when that happens, we call it something, the B is the something from nothing. Why does the B call the A nothing? It's a little bit rude since it's creator, right? It calls it nothing because it has zero way of understanding what that is. Because the A did not leave any evidence or any of itself inside of B, like a normal cause and effect relationship. Like when pool ball B is going at 3 miles an hour, I can understand that A was previously going at 3 miles an hour and that A has something called speed and distance. Like I can measure myself and therefore know something about where I came from, right? If I look at my DNA, I can know something about my parents' DNA and their parents' DNA. Like there's a trace. But here, there's no trace of the original of A inside of B because he created something from nothing. It just came out of nowhere. This is how we understand how we got here.
But so that means there's no trace, or that means there's the biggest trace?
Well, that's a good question. Going back to your meditation, where does that leave us? It leaves us in something in a very, very cool place. Remember, we're talking about two different types of avoda right now. We kind of got lost. One is going to be the avoda of simcha. And what we're saying is basically meditating on this Yesh Me'ayin brings you to joy. Why? I'm not happy yet, right? And the answer is because if you think about the result, where does that leave you with your relationship with Hashem? Is if we got here Yesh Me'ayin, and nothing can produce Yesh Me'ayin except for the Creator Himself. No being that was created has the power to make something else Yesh Me'ayin. That means if I got here Yesh Me'ayin, it means the Creator Himself put me here. And therefore there's an aspect of the Creator which is beyond all the world, which is the nothing, which is actually, that's the one responsible for making me. Anything in the higher dimensions, right? Let me give you like another example of this. Let's say you're going from, instead of thinking about intellect to emotion, which is a cause and effect, we said, right? Think about, let's say, from Bria to Yetzira. which is like going from one world to another world in the spiritual dimension. You with me there for a second?
Yeah.
Worlds are created one after the next, like a chain. Just like in you have a cause, which is your mind, and it creates an effect, which is your emotion. In the grand scheme of things, there's like a world called Bria, which is a cause for the effect of the world called Yetzirah right below it, and they're linked together. Therefore, there's a little bit of evidence of the higher one and the lower one, and there was a previous existence of the lower one inside the higher one, right? The cause and effect. So in that realm, when Yetzirah sort of is looking at its creation, it's like, hey, where did I come from? It's saying to itself, I came as an effect from the cause of Bria. And therefore it got there as like as a natural outcome. In other words, its relationship to Bria is cause and effect. And therefore when it looks at itself, it does not have the ability to say, wow, it must be that the essence of the Creator himself made me because I am something from nothing. Because in a certain sense, he's not something from nothing. He's a cause from an effect. And therefore, he doesn't have as close as a relationship to Hashem as, let's say, we do, where we don't experience where we came from. What the world above us that sort of brought us into existence, right? We don't know what it is. We don't know how it got there. So we specifically in the physical realm, we are the poster child for something from nothing. Because unlike the angelic forms, they can actually experience where they came from. There's like a source of a higher angelic form that made them, that they're aware of. And that's why they're angels, like the lights are on by them. They're having this godly experience 24/7 because they experience themselves being brought into existence by their cause at all times. So on one hand, they're very enlightened due to that. But when they think about, why is it that I understand my cause? And they're saying, because I have a familial relationship with my cause, it's kind of close to me, right? And on one hand, that's good because I can know where I come from and I have like an enlightened experience of God. But it must be that I was not made from the power of God that makes things something from nothing. Because I'm not experiencing myself here something from nothing. I'm experiencing myself here something from something. So the power of the Creator to create Yesh Mi'ayin, which is unquestionably his greatest power, is found here more than it is upstairs. And therefore, even though we're kind of left thinking like, oh man, I don't know anything about my Creator. I came here like he popped me out of nowhere. I have no real connection with him. That itself is something you can meditate on and be gladdened in your heart over the fact that the essential power of God, which can create something from nothing, which no other dimension or being can do, is invested inside of you because you're something from nothing. Mm-hmm. And that is joyous because you suddenly feel very close to Hashem, like he loves you more than he loves the whole rest of creation.
Woo! I said it yesterday.
That's my man right there. He's feeling the joy, right? You need to think about that. I probably need to say it a little bit clearer, and everybody needs to think about it. But he's going to work with us a little bit more on that. Go ahead.
I don't know. Can't we think about? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe
he's the unknowable, unnameable God, right?
Yeah.
There is nothing that we can truly know about the essence of God, right? It's like it doesn't. He's beyond description.
Can't we know that that's the cause?
We know that it's the cause, but what you're getting caught up in is semantics. What you're calling cause just means A and B. Right, but when we talk about cause and effect versus something from nothing, we're using, they both are A and B. There's both something here, and one comes out of the other. So it's just that one we call cause and effect, and when we're saying it's beyond a causal relationship, because causality it comes together with some meaning, which means that there is a relationship, a knowable, a tied-in relationship between the cause and the effect. We're not saying there's not an A and B and that we don't come from A. We're just saying that the way we come from A, we just don't call that, in Hebrew at least, a cause. Because there's no seeming causality between the one and the other.
But isn't there?
There isn't. We literally, it's like he just produced us in such a way that from here, there's no real telling what he is. We don't know what the Creator is because of his creation. Because he's infinitely beyond his creation in ways that there's no relationship even between them.
Some, no?
There's the only relationship there is that there's some external aspect of God, right? Which has the capability of creation. Now, right? So in other words, let's say for example in you might have you might be the next brilliant Rebbe, right? Who can think about the most wondrous things and produce, thousands of books on topics that no one understood. You can also kick a soccer ball, right? So it could be that Hashem has a power inside of himself which is equivalent to what we call the work of his hands, something extremely immaterial and unimportant when it comes to actually what God is. It's not, I can never really define you by the work of your hands. It's something which is so external that it gives me really no knowledge of who you really are. And from maybe the work of his hands, which existed in Hashem, that from that little part, he created the world. So in a certain sense, you could say there's some kind of a piece of God inside of the creation, but that piece that he put inside of us itself is completely incomparable to the real God. It's like he siphoned off a finite, look at it as a finite and infinite. Let's say the world is finite, and Hashem bears the ability to have some kind of finite aspect to himself, but he himself is infinite, and therefore the finite, in compared to infinity, is by definition mathematically nothing, right? It takes up no space, it's completely insignificant, unimportant, has no relationship whatsoever. You can't know anything about the finite from the infinite from the finite, right? So from that finite aspect of Hashem,
It has no relationship whatsoever.
not really. They're categorically apart, right?
Yeah.
Something that comes to an end can never be used to describe something which that has no beginning and no end, right? It's something which we call be'ein aruch. There's no comparison. That's literally the definition. There's no comparison, right? Like for example, mathematically, I'll give you. Look at it like this: you have 1 over a billion. Is 1 compared to a billion? Yes. You know how much? It's 1/1000th of a billion, right?
Yeah.
And that's called it's mathematically so. It's a comparable thing that this is one part out of this. And therefore they're compared because that one part was sort of in this part, and I can know a little bit about a billion because if I have a billion of these ones, I reached my goal.
Yeah.
But 1 over infinity and a billion over infinity mathematically equals 0. If you put 1 over a billion, it's 1/100000th. If you put a billion over infinity, it equals 0 because how much of parts of infinity is a billion? No parts. A billion, if you have a billion things, it takes up nothing from infinity. Infinity is not affected by your taking a billion. It's still infinity. And therefore, its mathematical relationship is, which is like what a fraction is. It's it's the comparison of these two things. Sometimes it equals 1/100000th, that's the comparison, a small comparison. Sometimes it equals 0 comparison, right? So finite compared to infinite, no matter if it's 1 over infinity or a billion over infinity or anything over infinity, the comparison between those things mathematically is 0 for the simple reason that from a finite thing, you have no comparison, you take up no space, and you're meaningless compared to an infinite thing. So the world is a finite thing. So even if you want to say that finite thing started off inside of Hashem, and therefore when he creates it, he emanates the finite thing which was inside of himself, and now we are the emanation of that finite thing. So you might say, well, I have some knowledge of myself as I am inside of my Creator, because I can compare myself to his finite part, at least. But that's not what we're talking about. The fact that it came out of nowhere is that we're comparing ourselves to him, to the infinite part, and therefore there's no comparison. Yeah.
I was thinking, and this is what works for me,
Interesting.
is that
Makes sense,
the
yes.
blessings that we say before the Shema, the first blessing seems to be God the Creator and God the Infinite. God has created all the luminaries, everything. And that's kind of like awesome. That's kind of an amazing thing. And then the second bracha is that somehow Hashem loves us.
Right.
And to go from there to there is to me it's like going from the infinite to the finite, and there's a joy connected to it, that the God that created all of this is the same God that
loves you,
cares about every single thing that I do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, that's kind of very connected to what we were saying.
The Rabbi HeChaltzu, I met him once.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Milwaukee, and he said that when he says the Amidah, he imagines that the Malachim, the angels, are saying, as just before he starts, he takes us 3 steps backwards. He says, "Shh, HeChaltzu is saying Amidah." Shh. Just saying that they really care.
Right,
they really
right,
care that
right.
that our prayers mean that much.
Yeah.
Even though we're praying to the infinite.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, like so you have infinite,
Mm-hmm.
like divided by something, and then all of a sudden we get like finite world, so it doesn't equate, right? Infinite divided by something equals finite. That's not. It doesn't like add up. So you're saying there's no relationship between the
You
two.
can't divide up
Exactly,
infinite.
exactly.
You can't
But
divide
somehow,
up infinite.
Somehow the infinite did something and then got a finite, which is like you're saying doesn't equate the relationship.
I'm saying that
isn't,
because God can do anything, so
Yeah.
inside of his infinity, there is like, let's say, this drop of water inside the ocean. But the ocean goes on forever. It's not a regular ocean, right? So having a drop inside of that thing is kind of like, it doesn't mean anything. Its comparison to the ocean is 0. It's 1 over infinity, which equals 0. 0 significance, 0 presence, right? Because it's completely negated before something infinite. It doesn't, if it's a billion, if it's a real ocean, so one drop has like something to say. It has like some like personality. When it comes to its father, parent, ocean, he's like, yeah, you're huge, but I'm still like one part of you. But when it comes to an infinite ocean, you're not one part of me because I go on forever. I can't be broken up into parts. I have no end. So your little part is actually just a state of 0 significance compared to me. Like you don't exist. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't take away anything from me that you're there. You're not a piece of me because I am not into pieces that can be broken up. Right? And so therefore the notion of infinite in the space of infinity has a 0 significance. It's what we call batal b'metzius. Its existence is negated entirely from any
the
importance.
notion of what in infinity you said?
Of the notion of finite in front of infinity. Right? And the point is that the world like basically is I'm losing the word there. But it is Hashem's finite part, which is insignificant to him to begin with, like put on stage and exited from him. So when it comes out, when we want to compare ourselves to God, we're finite, and even compared to the part of God inside of himself, which is finite, that itself has no relationship to the real God who is infinite.
No relationship. Doesn't it have some relationship?
When you say it has some relationship, in other words, it has a relationship whose value is 0. It's completely insignificant, right?
Okay.
And it gives us no knowledge of the Creator because the fact that I end means I don't have the capacity to wrap my mind around because the thing I'm trying to wrap my mind around goes on forever and cannot be wrapped around. And therefore I have no knowledge. How can I have a knowledge of something?
Doesn't it give us like a drop of knowledge about something? Like if you have
Yes, it gives. That's right. But here's the thing: it gives us a drop of knowledge about what part of God, His finite part. It doesn't give him a drop of knowledge about the true God, because the drop cannot contain inside of its finite boundaries any notion of what infinity means. Right? It's not. It's something which is essentially categorically beyond our ability to know. And the fact that He produced us in this way, it's like He actually created a scenario where our relationship with Him is one that we feel infinitely distant, right?
What? Do we?
I feel like, Rabbi, when they say it's 0, it's not true. And this is like the whole punchline. 1 divided on any number into infinity is 0.0099, and the end is a 1, and that's us. Because the end is
no,
not
there's no
zero.
end. There's no end there though.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
they
it is. I just
say,
feel like the
in
math
the
problem
brain,
doesn't somehow capture
mathematically
it.
say
the full
it's
way.
0.
There's like
You know
something
why?
that's like,
You have to accept it.
you know what I mean?
It's not
There's a-
true. I never accepted it from the dad.
There's a 1 somewhere.
like I know you're saying you don't feel like the
Okay,
world.
no,
You wake
it's
up
zero,
and it's
zero,
like
zero,
you look out. There's a
one
world.
at the
There's no like sort
What
of
do you mean
clear
zero forever?
relationship where the
I would
links
say
are
zero
like.
forever, but the one at the end-
There also kind of is in a way, right?
Well,
Like,
You could
tell
link
me
yourself up into
it's 0
spiritual
forever,
worlds
I know
that
there's a
preceded you.
small-
In theory, like
0.0
you can
forever,
imagine
that one
them,
at the end of
but like the
forever,
source of all things, you don't have any knowledge of this
Now,
from
cannot be a
you,
one.
from
We're
your
like telling you
existence,
this logic
right? It doesn't
Now
appear to you.
somebody
It doesn't
told
like
you, how could something turn
like
into
for
nothing?
example.
Like what, with your
All right.
brain, like this something turned into nothing?
How can something with
Because scientists said it like 1,000 years.
How can an
No
endless
way.
thing have an end?
What?
How can an endless thing have an end?
And how could an unendless, how could a something be a nothing? Like that's another question. How could the yesh turn into ayin? Like everyone on, how could this endless thing have an end? And I have a question. How does this one disappear and evaporate to nothing? That's not mathematical. So
But
there has to be at the end of that end a one. And if there's no end, then there's no existing of that number. The number needs to exist at the end. And if there's no end, you can't then say there's no existence. That's our connection to Hashem. That small, we're 0.00.
But I don't
We're
know if
nothing.
mathematically
We're
that's
still
true,
something.
but also I feel like the math problem doesn't count.
No, we have zero. In that sense, we have zero. In other words, mathematics there with that little one at the end, it's not able to capture the true negation that we have because they're in a physical world which you and I in a physical world can't capture, cannot actually truly negate ourselves through and through because our feeling of self is we're so self-assured that we exist. Like you just asked the question, how can something really be there and not be there? Like you refuse to exist, believe it, and therefore you want to have that little one at the end. But that's because we're a yesh, and we're positive that we exist, and we're not sure if God exists, right? But the reality is that all that exists is God, and frankly, we don't really exist in the sense that we feel that we do. Our existence is a pure negation. That's your real question. How can it be that something is really nothing? But don't stick that one on the end and decide that the something is really something, because that's a confusion of what's actually taking place, right? The question is, how is a something really nothing? Isn't that the whole real investigation into the whole Chassidus? Is that what Shar HaYichud V'Amunah is about? That like the existence of something actually is oppositional to a certain. The existence of any particular thing is by definition, in a certain sense, like idol worship. Because it's in the opposition to the true nature that ein od milvado. So it's been perplexing philosophers since the beginning of time. What is going on with this world here? And some people want to say, forget the oneness, like we're all really here, and there's even powers that are our source, and there's many things. But there's this notion of it seems to, and that's what we're trying to describe here. No, the reality is that the world is not what it appears. Like that piece of one inside of the infinite, it doesn't actually have its own existence. It can only appear to exist when the infinite removes itself from being there. Whether it's an actual removal or a tzimtzum, which is just a appeared removal. But the notion of the existence of the finite can only even gain ground when the infinite decides to go away. That's the tzimtzum, right? Then all of a sudden the experience of separateness can materialize. And that's what we call yesh mi'ayin. And what we're saying is, that means that the yesh actually has no experience of what the truth is, what the ayin really is, because Hashem removed himself. The secret sauce is that he didn't really remove himself. It's not tzimtzum kepshuto, in a literal sense, like the Misnagdim wanted to say. The Or Ein Sof is still there, and the drop inside of it is still negated out of existence 100%. It's just that Hashem is the invisible man. And he's giving you the experience as though you exist in a finite space, but you don't. And that's how you can have existence which is really not, it is really of no significant existence whatsoever. It is and it's not at the same time. There's no little one there. It's not, it is a little bit. If it is a little bit, it might as well be a lot. It is, right? No, ein od milvado. It goes, the zero is going forever in truth, right? Just like a mathematical point is something that you can't actually draw because it doesn't exist. So whenever you want to make a point, it has to take up a little bit of space because we live in a world of mamashus, of gashmis. We can't even think outside of it. But theoretically, we can. And this theoretically is that the existence has zero presence. Not a little bit, not a 0.1, right? And why does that hurt? We want to say, because we're positive that we have to have some stake in this thing. I must be, right? No, the truth is that if you are at all you are is him. And the only reason you can experience that part of him is because the real part of him is hiding from you. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about here.
Isn't there a relationship that you're infinitely small compared to the infinite? So like there's also, you have some infinite, you have a relationship in that you're infinitely small, like you're infinitely small. like focus on the zeros instead of the one.
What does it mean exactly?
That there's it's 0.0000 forever.
But if
So
it's
there's
really
also-
forever, see that's where the mind,
Yeah.
human mind can't really wrap onto forever.
Yeah.
Forever, if forever is really forever, then there's nothing else but that, right?
Right.
It just feels
That's
like we're
what I'm
missing
saying.
a part.
That's the
You know what I
connection
mean?
to Hashem. Is
So,
that nothing more
so,
than Hashem.
okay.
It just feels like we're missing, like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean there's no relationship between the.
What I mean is that there's not that there's no relationship. He's consistently creating it, but we call it nothing because we have no experience of it due to the fact of the way that he made it.
Don't we have,
He's hiding himself 100% from us by producing us in this particular way. If he would have produced us in a way where it was from like intellect to emotion, a cause and effect causality relationship, then we would actually be able to like feel and study and know about him due to the little piece that he left over in us that is that remains and therefore there's a piece of the cause in the effect. The way that he made this, why we call it Yesh, it's like the way that I remember hearing it from my Rosh Hashiva once, it's not obviously not a real example because we don't have one. It's like a remote control, or like what I was saying, like a magic trick. Like it got there without any deliverance from the giver. This is the wonder of what the Jewish people call the creation God here, something from nothing. And that's what he's saying. It's like, meditate on this for a second. It'll like blow your mind. There is no trace that he left behind.
Isn't there like a little piece of the infinite?
No, there's a little piece of the finite, was what I was trying to say. Like Hashem also has a finite part inside of himself, which itself is infinitely not relatable to his true self. He like bears that in him, and with that part of himself, he made us. So to a certain degree, there's an aspect of him in us, but it's the part within him, which anyway is incomparable to the true him. Because he also has the ability of finite reality inside of his infiniteness, which has no relationship with his infinite self. So we come from an aspect of him which is so minuscule to be considered as naught, and then that's what what the entire source of our existence is.
How does the finite part of the infinite Hashem have no relationship to the infinite part? How does the finite part of him have no relationship to the infinite part of him?
Okay, so that's a good question, but it's very
Seems like
simple.
they have to have a relationship.
To some degree, they have a relationship, but they have the kind of relationship that infinite has to finite, which is 1 over infinite equals 0. So their relationship is not one that can be, that there's any translation or knowledge about the one dimension to the other dimension due to the nature of how significantly different they are, to the point of incomparable. Right? It's not that one is not from the other. We're not saying that there's not a way to find God in this world. Right? But the point is that he made this in such a way that he ultimately, that's what we call the world. It's all like built into the Hebrew language. The world is called olam. And the word olam means helam, which means hidden. That the very existence of this place means that he is completely hidden from us. Right? That's what the name of this world is, that God is hiding. That's what he called it in Hebrew.
There's a scientist here, and so I forgot his last name, it's like Rabbi Dr. Jonathan something. Maybe he knows.
Rambam?
Yeah, what did he say?
He has this whole thing about cause and effect and how it's actually like, even in this world, it's not a thing. Like you can take a video of a hammer hitting like a sheet of glass, you slow it down, you pause at a point where the hammer is hitting the glass, but the glass isn't broken yet, which shows that the hammer hitting the glass isn't the cause of the glass shattering. And he said that why the glass shatters is because Hashem's always constantly creating, which is like the contraction and the creation, like the whole thing about contraction.
That's cool. That's another level of awesome.
So we can make sense of it. We say that it's the hammer that hit the glass, and that's why the glass broke. But really, it's like just Hashem always constantly creating.
Yeah. Yes, that means you're like totally detached from building a God in your brain, because cause and effect is something that's happening in the human's brain. It's not something it's a definite in reality. That's the biggest
Well, no.
they say. They're right. They're hitting it on the nail. Like if
But
you
it's not.
logic,
It's no. But no. Hold on.
maths, you have no way.
No, but God
Yeah,
created
Hashem,
that. God created that cause, that feeling in the human brain. It's not like a human construct. We are.
Knowledge on him. That's what I mean. He caused it in your brain.
Another way
and
of-
you can't
another way
use
of-
it to like define him. because you're closed.
Exactly.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why
Yes.
I'm
That's
not-
exactly
I'm
what I'm
not
trying
no guy who's
to.
gonna-
That's what I'm trying to explain right now.
That's so
Right.
deep. So that's
But let me say what he said in other words, and I'll try and wrap up because we're also unfortunately out of time. But let's say, for example, the hammer and the nails a little bit, right? But let's just take time, pieces of time. Time itself looks like cause and effect, right? From one moment to the next, it looks like I took this cup and I grabbed it. This all like makes sense here. Like I'm grabbing this, I'm pulling it back. Clearly, this cup could not be back here unless I caused it to do so. It's so obvious that there's forces of nature that are just running everything. But what does Torah say? B'chol yom tabi ma'asav bereishis. Hashem is being mechadesh every second the whole existence, which means that there's nothing and then there's something, and then there's nothing and there's something. Which means in reality, time is not at all what we perceive it to be. The fact that I'm moving over here and now I'm over here was a two different versions of an entire reality that Hashem created out of nothing. It's just that He created them like a film, like where one follows the other, and therefore I think I'm the same person that sat here a second ago with all the same memories and decided to move my arm and then pull the cup back. But really it's just like another frame of God that He projected into reality one after the next, because that's how the world got here. He's actually making this thing be here from no cause. And every second it's just here without a cause. But He did it in such a way where we're almost positive, right, that the hammer hits the window and that's what makes it break. But in reality is there was a window created and there's a hammer created, and the next frame, which is completely disconnected from the other. In other words, if Hashem wanted to, He could bring the next frame out. There's an elephant and a bear there instead of a hammer and a window. Nothing's forcing Him to make it the way it is. Yeah. It's not sitting here natural, stuck this way. Hashem is producing the whole thing from nothing every second. It's just that He produced it in a way where He makes it look like 1 minute follows the next, and that's called the Seder HeChaltzu. And He's like overlaying inside of this experience of something of Yesh Me'ayin. He's overlaying it with this experience. That's what I'm saying. It's not a human invention. It's a big time godly invention where He's like done it in such a way where it seems to have a flow, it seems to have a continuity and so forth. But that continuity itself is being produced something from nothing. And that's exactly what my point is, what his point was in the end. You cannot therefore, from this overlaying experience of nature and causality, make any conclusions about the truth of your existence, that it comes absolutely from nothing with no explanation at every second. All you can do is study more and more about the realm of causality, and this is where people get lost in nature and make all kinds of conclusions that have nothing to do with reality, because they're missing like the bigger picture, which is that we are constantly being represented here according to Hashem's design, which makes no sense. It cannot be understood at every second. And nothing you're going to point to in this world is going to give you any greater clue as to why He's doing it like that. Now, nonetheless, you're asking, can't we know anything about God from here? Yes. So by inside the natural cause of things, He gave us the Torah. And therefore He embedded inside of the realm of nature and time, because the Torah, first mitzvah, is to sanctify time, right? And space. And so He gave us like a way out of this maze to find the true Him by connecting to Him in this dimension through the Torah mitzvahs. The Torah mitzvahs are a medium which have a connection point to the true Ein Sof, but nonetheless are relevant only in a realm of time and space. And so He basically, this is like the ladder, Jacob's ladder, to climb out of this reality of causality and have a connection. So there is a way there, but it's not a way there. The Jacob's ladder only goes so far. You can't climb into infinity. There's a jump. And that's the Torah mitzvahs is given like Pesach is called like a jump. Something had to jump over the gap of reality between this causality and the infinite. And this was Hashem's gift to us, also called Matan Torah, that He put basically a way for us to access the true Him inside of this realm.